As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So over the past few days, there's been a lot of indications from Israeli officials that they plan to really ramp up their military operations in southern Gaza. And a U.S. official said on Sunday that Israel has the right to expand its military operations in southern Gaza, but said the Biden administration is looking for a delay in the plan to account for the hundreds of thousands of civilians who have fled the fighting from the north. So this is a quote from John Feiner, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor. So he's Jake Sullivan's number two. He said, quote, "In the event that we believe that Israel is likely to embark on combat operations in the south, we believe both they have the right to do that, but that there is real concern because hundreds of thousands of residents of Gaza have fled now from the north to the south at Israel's request," end quote. So Israel has been bombing South Gaza throughout the war, even after asking people to evacuate there. And there are stories of people that left the north only to get bombed in the south. But now Israeli officials are vowing to further expand the war in the south because there have been airstrikes there. You know, the bulk of the fighting, of the airstrikes and the ground fighting has been in the north. But ground operations are expected to begin now in the south. And Reuters reported on Saturday that more civilian casualties are expected in the south because there's more, there's, again, hundreds of thousands of people that have taken refuge there, that some are just living out in tents on the street. But that fact has not deterred the Israelis from planning to launch this big military operation in the south. And, what Feiner said here is kind of what we've been seeing throughout this war. You see the U.S. officials kind of act like they care about civilian casualties and that they want Israel to limit civilian casualties. But the truth is they don't, because they're not using any leverage over Israel that they have. And the U.S. continues to provide military aid unconditionally. Pentagon says the weapons they are sending can be used without limits. This article is from Kyle. On Friday, the UN said that it was no longer able to continue aid deliveries into Gaza as an Israeli fuel blockade of the enclave has led to a widespread communications blackout. The World Health Organization warned that the ending of aid deliveries means the immediate possibility of starvation for the 2.3 million people in Gaza. So they're saying that the communications is down because there's no fuel, and it makes it impossible to manage or coordinate humanitarian aid convoys. And this is something, I think, as this war continues, and it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight, I think we're going to see a lot of people die from disease due to the lack of clean water and possibly starvation. This is some good news. The Senate passed a bill to suspend military aid to Azerbaijan. So the Senate on Thursday passed a bill by voice vote that would suspend military aid to Azerbaijan for 2 years following Baku's takeover of Nagorno-Karabakh, which pushed over 100,000 ethnic Armenians out of the territory. So Nagorno-Karabakh was, I usually describe it as an ethnic Armenian enclave within what they call Azerbaijan's internationally recognized borders. But they basically ethnically cleansed the area of the 120,000 Armenians that live there. According to the numbers I see, I'm not sure if all 120,000 were pushed out, but over 100,000 were. So this bill, the Armenian Protection Act of 2023, would prohibit the president from issuing a waiver that allows the U.S. to provide Azerbaijan with military assistance. U.S. aid to Azerbaijan was banned by Section 907 of the 1992 Freedom Support Act, and that was passed during the first Nagorno-Karabakh War. But in 2002, the George W. Bush administration was happy with Azerbaijan's, whatever they were doing for them during the war when the war on terror first started. So they began providing a waiver to give military aid to Azerbaijan. And the U.S. has issued that waiver every year except this year since 2002. And pressure has started to really build not to issue that waiver since the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh War, when Azerbaijan took a lot of territory around Nagorno-Karabakh that was controlled by Armenia. So that Armenia won control of during the first Nagorno-Karabakh War. So Zelensky has said that deliveries of artillery shells from the U.S. have decreased since Israel unleashed its campaign in Gaza following the October 7th Hamas attack. So the U.S. has provided Ukraine with a huge amount of artillery ammunition since Russia launched its invasion last year, including over 2 million 155 millimeter artillery shells, and that is the big ticket item, is the 155 millimeter version. So the U.S. sent over 2 million, and supplies are strained as Ukraine is using ammunition at a much faster rate than not only what the U.S. can produce, but what the entire NATO alliance can produce. Supplies are even more strained now that the U.S. has been backing Israel's onslaught in Gaza. That support includes near daily weapons shipments, and there is a report from Axios that said the U.S. has actually diverted artillery shipments that were bound for Ukraine, diverted them to Israel. So Zelensky told reporters on November 16th, quote, "Our deliveries have decreased. It's not like the U.S. said we don't give Ukraine any. No, it's just that everyone is fighting for stockpiles themselves. This is life. I'm not saying that this is positive, but this is life, and we have to defend what's ours," end quote. So according to Defense One, Ukraine fires about 240,000 155 millimeter artillery shells per month, which is significantly higher than what the U.S. can produce. The U.S. has ramped up monthly production to a rate of 28,000 shells and is working to reach a goal of 80,000. And when it comes to Ukraine's war, the war in Ukraine, there's other issues for Zelensky, besides the tightening supplies. And one of those is just the fact that Biden still hasn't gotten that $61 billion he's looking for to fund the war for another year.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Gas Digital Network.
So Mike Johnson, who's and listen, as somebody named Dave Smith, when I tell you your name's forgettable, just know that's a problem. But Mike Johnson, who's the new Speaker of the House, we'll see how long he lasts, in a kind of interesting move that I did not see coming, he pretty quickly released a whole lot of January 6th footage. Isn't that right, Rob?
Yeah, and that must be why he got some support for his post, because they instantly got this next budget deal through, which is funny when people want to go home for Thanksgiving. They'll put the partisanship aside and go, they'll just go, fuck it, we can have this debate next month and pretend like we're not going to have the funds and come up with it last minute. But when Thanksgiving's on the line, everyone wants to go home for Thanksgiving. Democrats and Republicans can come together, but of the Republicans that had opposed McCarthy, I think they were somewhat upset here that there wasn't any attempt whatsoever of trying to pretend like we were going to scale back budgets. Of course, Mike Johnson's first words were, "We'll make sure Israel gets its funds." But it seems like they got a slight win, because I do remember with McCarthy, there was pressure on him to release the rest of the January 6th footage, which he was not doing. So it seems like this must have been part of the ouster, was an agreement that the next person in the post would release the footage.
It's amazing. Possibly. It is amazing though, like just how corrupt things are, that like it's crazy that there would even be an option to not release this video, or at least if you can't for some reason, then just to explain that. To just go like, listen, I would love to release this too, but we can't because there's footage that could
pressure from the deep state.
Yeah, right. Instead of just saying that.
Also, the fact that we brought it up on the show before, but you had a guy who was sitting in jail, Jacob Chansley, and then they put out the footage, and he's out of jail within 2 weeks because it becomes apparent to the American public that guy shouldn't be in jail. They were opening up doors for him. They were filming him. He was outdoors saying, "Hey guys, Donald Trump's telling us to go home." It was very clear to any, let's just say, compassionate human being that if they watch the footage that day, they don't go, "That's a violent terrorist that should be spending his life in jail."
Listen, no exaggeration. The guy had been portrayed by the biggest media conglomerates in the world as the leader of a violent attempted insurrection. This man tried to overthrow the government of the United States of America in a violent way. And then we get videos out of him where he was clearly a non-violent, calm person walking through the Capitol building, being respectful to police. And the police being respectful and assisting him. Well, so it's just like the difference between what was described versus the reality was insane.
The police almost looked like, and I'm saying blatant conspiracy right here, but the police people almost look like when in high school, let's just say you had a friend who was too drunk and you start putting him in situations because you think it's funny. It almost seemed like they're like, "Oh, this guy's a real character," and they were having some fun with him, or maybe even trying to get footage, but they were giving him a tour. But
yes,
to not be completely conspiratorial and actually make a point, this is how evil the machine is and how they will treat us when they get the opportunity. After that footage came out, and I think the machine had to reckon with the fact we can't keep this guy in jail. This looks too terrible.
Yeah.
Instead of instantly going, we have to review all cases. We have to look at all the footage. There might be other people who are wrongfully in jail. They turn around and they go, we're releasing him based off of good behavior and other reasons. Because they can't admit any fault, even if it means that other people are going to have to suffer and sit in jail. And then they try and lock down the other footage, because the first thing you would think if you cared about human lives and humanity and, American citizens is, wow, we better be reviewing all this footage because we're 1 for 1 on getting someone out of jail who shouldn't be in jail. How many other people shouldn't be there?
Yeah, no, there's no humanity in it. I mean, that's the truth, is that these people are evil, And if it served their political interests for you and your family to be murdered or imprisoned or tortured or just ruined, they would do it and lose no sleep over it. You know, a couple quick clips that we've gotten. For the record, Mike Johnson released 44,000 hours of January 6th footage, and he just did that. So it's going to take a while for all of the internet sleuths out there to, go through all of this and find out what, what clips might be very interesting or very revealing. But here's a couple of the new ones that have come out already. We got two here, Brian. You could just play whichever one first. So on this one, you have basically what could only be described as a guided tour. There was a police officer in the front kind of leading them, bunch of other police officers standing aside, watching them. Everybody's calm. They're holding American flags. They're holding what is that? It's not the Don't Tread on Me, but yeah, Live Free or Die or something like that. Walking calmly. Everyone's got their phones out. You see people, some of them are even wearing COVID masks. Those are the stupid ones. Now, this is one where they've got a gentleman in handcuffs. They take him over
his asshole. They're just inserting something. They're making sure.
Well, they're taking off his handcuffs. They take him off the handcuffs that they had this guy in. He then gives a pound to one of the officers. And then they all just have a little bit of a conversation here.
It looks like an Uber Eats delivery gone wrong.
It really does. And they just let him go. And they let him go, no problem. Look, I'm not saying there's an overwhelming conclusion that can be ascertained from this. But what we're looking at here, if you had to describe it, seems to be, obviously we've seen the video. Some windows got broken. There was a little bit of trampling going on at certain instances. The worst video by far that's come out of January 6th is that cop shooting Ashley Babbitt, who just kind of shot into a crowd for no apparent reason. And then what was going on all around it seemed to be a very calm, guided tour that cops were kind of shepherding, let's say, and they were kind of allowing it. You don't even see anywhere in here cops. There's no clear evidence of the cops ever telling people they have to leave. Like no signs of you have to leave right now or you will be arrested if you don't leave. Like nothing like that. It just seems like the cops are totally allowing them to do it. And I'm sorry, but this is not at all what was described to us on the corporate press about this as it was happening and in the days and months and years afterward. Or they would still say that this was an attempt to overturn an election, a violent insurrection, all of this nonsense. That's not what any of this videotape is showing at all. Any other thoughts, Rob?
Well, not to cut this down, I don't think that these two videos are wildly interesting or add that much more context. It's going to be interesting because they've held the footage for so long of where their edits made or there are the most precious things being left out. But I guess the most interesting things to see in my eyes are going to be the walkthrough footage of people that did go to jail and kind of like their entrance into the building, like basically what we got to see for Jacob Chansley. For him, we saw he walked in peacefully, like he didn't break his way in. And there had been people speculating that he had done that, and then we got video proof that he hadn't. Yeah, so it's going to be the walkthrough of beginning to end of the people that went to jail. That to me is very interesting to see, how many of these people engaged in violence. Also, of the people that were kind of the ringleaders. How many of them have military profiles? How many of them have potential ties to the FBI? Like the people I'm saying, the people that were actually moving the gates, the people that were actually taking down the windows, the people that were in the crowd actually yelling, hey, we're going into the building. If they can start actually sifting through the videos and profiling those individuals and seeing who those people are, and if all those people have been jailed, we'll start getting a few more questions answered and seeing if there's more Ray Epps out there.
Article where it says the FBI lost count of how many paid informants were at the Capitol on January 6th and later performed audit to figure out exact number of ex-officials were in there. So there was a lot of suspicion, and they'll see it. No wonder they didn't want to show the films. There was an indictment against the people saying that there was an insurrection going on. In truth, what they were doing to prevent this truth from coming out, they were closer to being the insurrectionists than the people who went visit the Capitol and got a little bit rowdy. So it to me is just atrocious of what went on. So I was delighted to know about this. I hope nothing fades on this. I hope there's no redactions, say, oh, well, we better blank this out. So let's see what happened. But it's a good sign. We don't have somebody that we can say is a perfect libertarian Speaker of the House, but he, I believe, has good instincts and a good desire to do right. He did say he was going to do this, and he did it. And Chris, I think this is good.
And they don't call it an empire of lies for nothing. This January 6th, it just fits with the rest of the story because big government, especially government the size of ours, which is the biggest ever, it functions and breathes on deceptions. And this is hard for the average American to cope with, to grasp, because in our normal lives, we don't live with constant lies. We couldn't function. Yes, people lie, you deal with it here and there, but when it comes to government and it's all the time, that's hard for people to accept. And I get it. I get that it's hard to accept. But it really is, especially at this stage in the game. All the wars, COVID lockdowns, the vaccines, when Trump was president, it was on steroids. January 6th, Russiagate, it was just one after another after another. And by the time you debunk one, they're already on to the next one. And I remember back in the George W. Bush years, somebody in the administration said, we create our own reality, and then you guys go and you fight about it. And that's what it is. They create a false reality. Americans go back and forth, fight about it. The truth comes out, but they're already on to the next one. And Americans really have to get to where the Soviets ended up. And by the time the Soviet Union was on its last leg, the Soviet citizens knew that everything that the government was saying was a lie. They knew it. They didn't believe it anymore. And Americans are not there yet because Americans still believe. Enough do. So, I only have, one piece of advice. Get there faster. Realize that it really is an empire of lies.
And yet, eventually truth wins out in the end. And I think that's what's happening. Sometimes you have to wait a generation to really find out the truth. I keep thinking about all this talk about honest elections of what happened in 1948 when LBJ stole the Senate race down there. Back there, it wasn't decided that it was a stolen election and all the corruption, but history has shown it was terrible, what went on. He became president, and he, of course, didn't turn out to be a very great president because he was working with a set of standards that were quite different. All these false accusations were made, and the sooner they release all those people that are still under arrest and suffering from the abuse of the legal profession, the justice system, the sooner they get released, the better. Yes, everybody admits there's probably was some violations and civil disobedience and a few things like that. But to be an insurrectionist and get away with that, they use that all the time. It's time, and this might just really be a real help in getting more truth out. Wait till they see all the documents, and maybe people will change their minds that have been bullheaded about saying, oh no, they're insurrectionists. They wanted to take over the government. Well, in a way, if you wanted to play a pun on it, that's what elections are all about. We want to take over the government. So it's darn right foolish, but I think this represents a nation that's drifting into oblivion, totally bankrupt, without moral standards, operating an empire that they can't afford, and this is what they have to spend their time doing. Chris?
Right, Dr. Paul, and the real tragedy of it is that the people in power believe that they can do what they want and will not pay any penalties for it. And at the moment, that seems to be true. When you think of the wars, the Iraq War, the Syria War, there's too many of them to even name here. We don't have enough time. Nobody gets punished for them. You just move on. When you think of COVID, that may be the biggest one the world has ever seen, and just move on. So the people that are doing these things, their egos get even bigger, and if they get a rush out of it, they may want even something bigger still. Because they get to do what they want and not pay the price. And this January 6th is just another one to add onto the pile. Will people actually pay for this? There was a whole January 6th commission. Trump was the one that did all this. Will anybody pay for this? I don't know. But I'm sure that the people at the top and in power are thinking, we can make this go away somehow. I don't know. But they have seemed to have done it in the past. And this is very dangerous. This is very dangerous for our freedoms. Because if the people in power don't have to follow any laws, you are not a nation of laws. This is the law of the jungle. It's the one who can convince, the mobs to do their bidding. And that's what the media does. And, it's very scary. It's very scary. This is not how the land of the free is supposed to be at all. If anything, the people in power have to be watched over carefully. And we have drifted to the extreme to where they're not.
Because somebody who calls himself a libertarian, and a lot of others say he's a radical libertarian, he has surprised a lot of people by winning the election. He's the president now. He has, some controversies which you can expect, and some accusations by a lot of people who don't like freedom, and they're going after him. But this is good. The one thing is, it wasn't like he was winning the election by hiding everything that he said or what his beliefs were by never saying that he was a libertarian. He didn't back away from it. So when the people were voting, they literally were voting for libertarianism. And of course, looking at the record, he's very, very good, but he's not going to be, under the circumstances, it's going to be a tough job to be able to carry out all these libertarian viewpoints, because we could look at his foreign policy, and that will be different. But I recall back in the 70s when there were severe problems coming out of the breakdown of the Bretton Woods, Argentina went way off by spending and deficit. But one of the students of Mises, Hans Sennholz, a professor at Grove City, was making trips down there to lecture and talk about Austrian economics. And I remember that very clearly. And there was a movement going on there, but there was not much follow through. So this is good, but there has to be some follow through. And I think so far a lot of this has been very, very good, because this means that people have heard the word more now than ever before, and they knew what they were voting for.
Do Argentinians really want what he says? I guess we'll see. Can he actually implement the things that he's saying? Or will they do like what they did with Trump, just mire him in controversy and legalese and just tie his hands? Again, I guess we'll see. The one thing that does rub me the wrong way when I hear him discuss foreign policy, he sounds like he would be a good fit on the GOP debate stage. How we talked about that. So his foreign policy is extremely, extremely important. Perhaps the most important, because your foreign policy can ruin your nation, whether you're capitalist, socialist. Our nation has been ruined by our foreign policy. So it is extremely important. So would he act out some of the things he's saying by sending troops or weapons or money? Who knows? But one thing that concerns me is if he follows everything that the U.S. government follows in foreign policy, he could be used for PR purposes. Oh, look, the president from Argentina supports this invasion, and he's a Rothbardian. Rothbard would turn over in his grave if he ever heard something like that. So that's one sticking point. As great as his message is, I would like more consistency, non-interventionist, not only at home, but around the world.